Well, we are so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Iiwm. I'm from the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. And today we are hosting the fourth event of a national book tour on this book, What Matters, Investing in Results. Does everyone has a copy? And the purpose of this book, I highly recommend you read it, even if you don't read it from page to page in one sitting. The whole point of it is to get a sense of what people, the community leaders are doing around the country to make sure that we're orienting our financing, funding, and programs towards results, towards outcomes. Not outputs, but outcomes. The results that our mission says that each of our missions say that we want to achieve. And so I want to say a big thank you to Paul Quinn College, the Nonprofit Finance Fund, and San Francisco Fed, who made this all possible. The Nonprofit Finance Fund and San Francisco Fed put this book together. And so they're going to be talking, this event is very much patterned after the events that were already had in Washington, D.C., New York City, and San Francisco. We're also going to be having the event, the same book tour, in other cities, including Philadelphia, Atlanta, and Boston, and Los Angeles. Thank you. And so the reason I asked the San Francisco Fed and Nonprofit Finance Fund if we could have the event here in Dallas is because clearly there's a need we have a sense of urgency to make sure that we're changing this conversation and we're part of this national conversation and movement and campaign to be involved in shifting our thinking from investing in outputs to investing in outcomes. So we're focusing on outcomes today and talking about business models that focus on outcomes. So outcomes are a measure of success, not simply outputs. So, and also I highly encourage you to stay after this event to the Places of Power event that's here, hosted by Paul Quinn College. They're going to be a phenomenal speakers speaking. and that will be from 3 to 5 p.m. I also just want to give a special shout out to Roy Lopez, to David Erickson, Ian Galloway, Marianne Hull, Molly Hubbard Doyle from the Dallas and San Francisco Feds for making this happen. Also, thank you to Anthony Bud Levine, Valerie Bartlett, Jen Tlansky, and Janet Gensler. You guys are awesome, and I love working with you, and I hope to be able to continue working together. And from Paulding College, so of course, President Sorrell, Chris Dowdy, Shana Stoneham, Dennis Coleman. I love working with you, and I hope there will continue to be lots of opportunities to work together. And also thank you to Representative Eric Johnson for being here today. Really appreciate you being here. So people usually ask us, why does the Fed care about this topic? And when when I say this, I mean community development, economic development, and workforce development. And the answer we give is, in general, so the Fed's responsibility is to make sure that we keep employment as high as possible, so unemployment as low as possible, inflation as low as possible, and our economy as stable as possible. Well, we're part of, David, Ian, Roy, Molly, Marianne, and I are all part of the community development function. And the community development function of the Federal Reserve, which is part of it, that covers the entire United States and the U.S. territories, is to make sure that we're promoting community development, economic development, and workforce development. So what does that mean? It means our responsibility is to help people get out of poverty, stay out of poverty, and then live their lives to the fullest potential, especially low and moderate income communities and underserved communities. So our conversation today fits very much in that space. The whole idea is, how do we make sure that everybody can live to their life's fullest potential regardless of which zip code they were born in. So we have an action-packed, full, rich group of conversations that are planned for today. And thank you very much for joining us. Please just keep on asking yourselves through this event, how can you, your organization, orient your programs, your funding, your financing towards outcomes? And for those of you who do use social media, if you use the hashtag #InvestInResults, please post this conversation today as well as in the future to social media. So please use hashtag #InvestInResults for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. And without further ado, I'd like to please give a very warm welcome to President Michael Sorrell, the President of Paulding College.
Good morning. Good morning. Now, I'm going to have to give you a little bit of grief. We are a historically black college. As a historically black college, we come out of the black church tradition. The black church tradition is a call and response tradition. Now, this looks like a Catholic school crowd, all right? In the black church tradition, call and response means when I say something to you, I need you to say something back. All right, so we're going to try this one more time. And if you get this wrong, I'm calling Father Clemens in for a mass. All right? Good morning.
Good morning.
So much. Don't you feel better about yourselves now? It is absolutely wonderful to have you all with us today. We first want to say thank you to our good friends at the Federal Reserve. Elizabeth, who is just, can we give her a hand just for all of our work? People are always amazed at this iteration of the Federal Reserve. It is a far more active and engaged version. People are surprised. This is not the first event that we have done with the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve in the Dallas office gets out and engages in the community around issues that are incredibly important. And this is an issue that is incredibly important. And it's one that touches all aspects of our lives. And at Paulding College, we believe in engaging in the issues of the day. We don't think that our job is to sit behind our walls, educate students just on a narrow focus of academic subject matter with no regard for what their lives actually entail. So you will see us engaging in things such as food deserts, environmental justice, access issues, and our new focus, which is going to be working to eradicate poverty, period. And I'll talk about that more today, but we believe that poverty is the single greatest issue facing our country today. We believe that if we don't do something to disturb the path of poverty for the 45 million Americans that are currently in poverty, and those individuals who will be displaced by automation and artificial intelligence in the coming years. And depending upon who you believe, those numbers could be anything from 40 million in 5 years to 45 million in 7 to 10 years. Whatever it is, this is an issue that we have to address because we cannot double the number of people in our country living in poverty and believe that it will not impact all of our lives materially. So at Paul Quinn College, we have now decided to turn all of our focus, all of our gaze on creating pathways out of poverty for people. And I know it's a little bit unpopular for a college president to tell you this, but education is not the pathway out of poverty. The pathway out of poverty is money. Right? I mean, think about it, okay? No, really, you can clap on that, okay? Unless we find a way for people to have access to the amount of money they need to live stable and secure lives, all the education in the world won't matter. Now, we can draw the connection between the two. We know it's there, but at the end of the day, this is about creating lives for people where they have the resources to live lives that communicate to them how important they are, how valuable they are, and how respected they are. And we believe that. Now, our places of power discussion that we will have later on this afternoon is about the discussion around gentrification and the fact that communities should not have to depend on being displaced to experience redevelopment, right? That's not right. I mean, if you have lived in a place 30 or 40 years and you have bought into the promise that life will be better for you, that your elected officials can deliver a life that's better for you, and their answer is that we're going to redevelop this so that other people can move in and you move out, that is a betrayal of their trust, and it's wrong. So we believe in something we call the access triangle, which is about creating access points for people who live in these communities to access the things that they need to permanently move out of poverty without permanently moving out of their communities. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But it is now my great pleasure to introduce my wonderful friend and fraternity brother, someone who I've known before he became famous as, a truth-telling state representative, someone who has no problem speaking truth as he sees it, and typically how he sees it is what the truth is, right? Which is great, because some of us engage in versions of the truth that no one can correspond, correlate, or confirm, all right? So we are thankful to have someone like State Representative Eric Johnson on guard and on duty down in Austin. We are thankful for his tireless efforts to make life better for all of us, and for his willingness not just to go along to get along, because we need leaders like that in this day and age. So my singular hope and prayer for him is that he does not spend his life in the state legislature, that there are places in Congress that will need his services better. Just want to throw that out there. And if not Congress, the Senate, wherever it is, okay, we know that we need a man of his talents in those places, and we are thrilled to have him on campus, as he is often here, and it gives me great joy to introduce to you State Representative Eric Johnson.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
First of all, let me say to President Sorrell, thank you so much for hosting this event here at Paul Quinn. It's great to be back on campus. I can't say enough about the leadership that Mike Sorrell has provided to this institution that we're at today, but also just to our city. I've known him for years, and he's always been incredibly engaged in civic affairs, what's going on in our city, our county, our state, our country. And when he was, I remember we were at the original Pancake House, and we were talking about you taking this position, and you were thinking about it. And I didn't know what was going to come of this. I didn't know how this was going to work out, but it has worked out obviously better than anybody's wildest expectations. I don't know if you guys all know, Fortune magazine just recently named him one of the most influential people, I think, in the history of the planet or something like that. He's somewhere between like Marcus Aurelius and Napoleon or something like that. It's a crazy list. I mean, it's like number 30, like between Marcus Aurelius and like Napoleon. It's weird. But he's incredible. He really is incredible. So thank you very much. And I want to thank the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas and the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco for joining with the Nonprofit Finance Fund to put this event together. I'll say this about the Nonprofit Finance Fund. I know it's in good hands because its CEO is someone I've known for a very long time. We were actually classmates at Princeton 20 years ago. So it's good to see my buddy Anthony Bud Levine here in Dallas. I mean, he's brilliant. I'll just say this. I know that for a fact. At Princeton, we have an exam that every student has to take to get out of school. It's called QE2. It's the one thing, we can all take different classes. We all have to take that one test. And they rank us all according to that test. And that man got the highest score at Princeton in our class. He's brilliant. And I can tell you, I still remember that. But I couldn't believe it was you. I just we were buddies. I didn't know he was that smart. So anyway, but thank you for doing this, Anthony. Thanks for having me speak just for a few minutes here. I will be brief. So let me tell you why I'm super excited about what you guys are doing here, what you're talking about. So my role when I'm not practicing law to feed my family is to represent the district that I was elected in 2010 here in Dallas to represent the state legislature. I'm a member of the Texas House of Representatives. I've been there for 8 years in the legislature. I ran 9 years ago and got elected. And basically my experience in Austin has been, I won't say fraught with disappointment. There's been a lot of disappointment. And I could give you a whole speech that was partisan in nature, but I don't think that's really the underlying problem. I don't think it's the partisanship per se that's been the source of my disappointment. The source of my disappointment has been, I think, the lack of serious policy discourse that takes place in the state capitol, and the lack of peer-reviewed, academically sound, tested, data-driven policy, and instead, politics really dominates what goes on in the Capitol. And every now and then, we might get lucky and pass some policy that actually has some root in rigorous academic study, but it's very rare. And it's hard to even shift the conversation in that direction because there's so many agendas that just don't comport with getting to the truth. They're more interested in many of the players in Austin in scoring a political point to win a primary or to move up the ladder. That's really what you see. You see people trying to score a point so they can win a primary, or you see them trying to score a point so they can leverage it up to a higher position. I, on the other hand, though, ran for office in 2009 and was elected in 2010 for a very different reason. I appreciate President Sorrell trying to put me in Congress. The reality is I'm very happy with state and local government where I am because I do believe this is where the real rubber meets the road for people who are interested in policy. It's the only level of government where things are actually still getting done. Washington is largely closed for business. Like nothing's coming out of Washington. New policies aren't coming out of Washington. Very few people in this room could name the last piece of legislation that they know anything about that Washington came together, worked on, and besides tax reform, I think arguably, not good policy, and certainly not based on policy. It's more of a political deal. So, state governments are really the laboratories of innovation in the country, but the innovation in places like Texas has been stagnated. And so when I read a few chapters from this book, I had to stop what I was doing and text Anthony and say, I want to get involved with this and be a leader on this issue in Texas. I'm going to tell you briefly why. Focusing on outcomes seems like an obvious thing, and it seems like, yes, that's what we must have been doing all along. I mean, it sounds like, well, what else would you be focusing on? Well, the answer is absolutely not outcomes. That's actually what we focus on. We are very much in state government set up to fund programs and things and based on outputs or what, that's the terminology that's used in the literature, but what I would just call, activities or actions. How many people took an AP exam? How many people spent the night in a homeless shelter? How many beds were filled in a mental health hospital. That's kind of what we do. And I think we do that because that's easily measurable. But the real challenge and what would be so beneficial to the state of Texas and what would be so transformative is if we could figure a way to shift our focus towards paying for the result that we really want. What we want is not the AP test. We want a college graduate. What we want is not a person spending the night in a shelter. We want a person we want a former homeless person. And so if we can figure out a way, and that's what this literature is all about, to get nonprofits, but I say, hugely important, state governments to start figuring out ways to fund based on outcomes and freeing up the nonprofit world to innovate and figure out how to generate those outcomes as opposed to figuring out ways to fill out our forms and check our boxes and give us our pounds of food delivered if we're funding a meal providing agency or something like that, then we will have come a long way towards solving the problems I think everybody in this room is concerned about. So to me, this is more than just something of intellectual curiosity. This is the key, or at least part of the key, to actually bringing about policy changes, which is why I ran for office in the first place, and something that the legislature, I think, should be more focused on. So I want to say thank you for starting the conversation, and thank you for fostering the conversation, Federal Reserve Bank, and thanks to all of you for being interested in this. I look forward to hearing what you guys come up with, and please, get my card, get my information. I would love to bring these concepts to Austin in a very practical way in terms of helping to change some of the way we fund programs, the way we write grants, to align them with this outcome-based philosophy. So thank you very much for your time, and have a great seminar together.
Thanks so much. No, I know, we're good. We're being informal. So Eric said to me last night, why are you guys not going to the Dallas Fed? It's so beautiful there. Sorry. We're good. Eric last night said to me, the Dallas Fed is so beautiful, why aren't we going there? And I said, because we'd rather be here at Paul Quinn College and feel such a spirit. So, we don't do this. No one's going to read my bio. This is really a conversation, a community conversation, which is why we're here, why I want to do this. And I just want to say thank you guys for setting this up so perfectly. First of all, thank you, President Sorrell, for hosting us. And I've read a lot about what you were doing here. I've watched videos on the web about the garden and everything else that's happening here. And it's really great to be here in person. So really appreciate you hosting. And the students in the back there, thank you guys. They were showing a lot more spirit and Southern hospitality than their New York equivalents would have been if we could appreciate that. And I really just want to thank David and Ian Galway and the team from Texas Federal Reserve. Elizabeth from the Dallas Fed have been really great partners on this. And then we also have some of our donors who make this possible. We are a nonprofit, the Nonprofit Finance Fund, and I will take a few minutes to talk about what we do and why we're here, and then really get to the meat of this conversation, which is not to hear me talking theoretically, but to really hear from people who are making this happen on the ground across the U.S., including here in Texas. So I want to say, George at the back, from Bank of America, has been a big supporter of ours, and this effort has involved a lot of funders, a lot of supporters. So I wanted to thank everyone. And then also my team, Jen Polanski, Valerie Bartlett, and Janet Genzer, somewhere. Yeah. Anyway, it takes a lot of effort to put something like this together, so I wanted to thank everyone. Thank you all for coming here. As you know, my name is Anthony Buglevine. I work at something called the Nonprofit Finance Fund. We joke that the one thing we all have in common at Nonprofit Finance Fund is no one knows what we do for a living when we go home to Thanksgiving, because our family's like, you're a nonprofit, but you're finance, what's that about? But what we are is we're a national organization, we are a nonprofit ourselves, and for 38 years we have been working across the country to try and figure out how to get the money and the resources that are needed by people in the community trying to make a difference to flow in more effective ways, so that ultimately we can take the generosity of donors, we can take the taxpayer resources that are needed, and the effort that goes on in all the incredible social sector organizations and get the results we deserve. And so we came to this work on outcomes, really linking what President Sorrell and Eric said. Our motivation is that our country is not where it needs to be. From a moral perspective, from a practical perspective, President Sorrell mentioned it's not just about unemployed people, and the immorality of a rich country living with that. It's also what's going to happen to the rest of our society if we let these problems linger. So for us, the motivation here is really to say, what can we do to take all the effort and the resources that are applied to social issues, but get the results we really deserve, the results that donors deserve, the results that the hard work of people in this room who are working these issues every day deserves, and ultimately the results that our communities deserve. And one answer to that question for us has been the story about outcomes. What would it take if we oriented our work around outcomes? And so I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about that after I show a brief video. I think we're going to do now. So we prepared this video, but Eric has kind of previewed. I don't know if you saw the video online, and now you're stealing our thunder. But we got a brief video, a little animation about what it is that we need, and then I'm going to come back and just talk for a few minutes about what sounds obvious. And Eric said it perfectly. He said it sounds obvious. Of course, we're all here to solve social problems. But what's it going to take to make what seems really obvious actually be real in how we all do our work? So show the video and then get into the
Nonprofits, governments, funders, and financiers of social services are often driven by a common goal: to help people and strengthen communities. Yet, is the current funding system hindering progress towards that goal? Take, for example, Jack. Jack has no job or permanent place to live, largely because of his struggles with severe clinical depression. So most days, Jack's best hope is a shelter called the Output Center. The Output Center takes him in, but they have no funding to get him treatment. In fact, he's been staying with them on and off for the past 3 years and not getting any better. The Output Center's funding is based solely on providing a safe and clean nightly shelter. While they're very good at what they do, this funding model means they can't focus their resources on treating the underlying causes of homelessness, like Jack's illness. Like so many organizations, they are funded based on outputs. Outputs are the measure of an organization's activities. For the center, that means the number of clients housed each night. This outputs-based funding model comes with conditions that make it hard for the shelter to focus on addressing underlying issues like clinical depression. Because of this model, Jack doesn't receive the treatment that would help him in the longer term, and so the cycle of homelessness continues. Now, let's look at a different approach. One day, Jack goes to a different shelter called the Outcome Center. Here, a staffer points him to Maya, a counselor who can begin treating Jack's illness. The Outcome Center has funding to invest in professionals, such as Maya, that help Jack and others like him overcome the very problem that brought him to the shelter in the first place. The center's belief is that with treatment of this sort, Jack will get and keep permanent housing. The difference here is a focus on outcomes rather than outputs. Outcomes are the tangible results that a shelter achieves and can measure, such as the number of clients they transition into permanent housing, who stay there for at least a year. The Outcome Center's outcomes-based funding allows them to address Jack's illness and put him on a sustainable path to recovery. This concept changes the way we think about funding and success. It reorients the funder-grantee relationship around long-term results. Nonprofits get the space to innovate, to tackle social problems. And most importantly, Jack has the support he needs to live a healthier life. To solve big problems, we need long-term solutions. An outcomes approach lets schools focus not just on how many students are in their classrooms, but on getting their students to graduate. It lets hospitals focus not just on how many patients they see and how often, but on whether or not those patients get healthy. We all want to get the most out of social sector spending, so it's up to all of us to deliver better outcomes for Jack and all communities by rewarding providers for the long-term value they create. Visit investinresults.org to join the conversation. Thank you.
So I hope that makes sense, and that's available on the web if you want to share that with your friends and so forth. I'm getting a 5-minute tag already, so let me go quickly. What I just want to do is talk about, again, this idea sounds obvious, but why it's not happening, and why when we work with Eric now to get some legislation passed in the session next year, it's going to be a challenge, because what this requires us to do is all work in a different way. And while the ambitions and the aspirations of everyone in the social system, I fundamentally believe, is to create better outcomes, because we've been locked in a different way of working, all of us have to shift out of how we work in order to pull this off. So I just want to quickly go through what that means for the different players in the system. So I'm going to skip these. It really requires, the way we work right now is, as we talked about, it's counting the activities we do, and not necessarily the results we get. And what we talk about is what's going to require everyone's system has to work differently. The service providers, the donors, government, clients, investors. So I'm going to quickly go through what that means. Who here is involved in working in a nonprofit organization who is providing social service? So I think you guys, well, that's great. This is a lot of you guys. So you know that right now when you're funding, what your funding pays you to do is to do activities. It's keep those shelter beds filled, keep the kids in the early child care center, keep them coming, flowing through. We're even here at Paul Quinn College, Professor Sorrell mentioned, it's really about making sure kids show up and graduate. And that's kind of the goal, and that's an outcome. The money often comes with compliance, so basically you're told you've got to do things a certain way, and in order to keep getting the money, you've got to prove you did what you said you were going to do and what you were told to do. In a outcomes-based world, you're not just managing for those results, you're managing actually the outcomes themselves. And I think you heard something really powerful this morning about what would it mean to go from thinking about the output of producing college graduates here to the outcome of reducing poverty. Well, suddenly, it's a whole different way of working. And it requires you to think in a different way, you have to be innovative, and you also have to start owning more of the problem. Because if one of the reasons is that your graduates aren't getting jobs, and that's why they're in poverty, suddenly, you've got to do something about creating jobs. And we see this time and again. If you shift from keep the homeless shelter bed filled to get people out of homelessness, now suddenly you've got to be part of the problem of building affordable housing if that's the issue in your community. So it changes the way that service providers work. It also puts risk on them. A lot of service providers say, I don't want to be paid for outcomes because I don't know that I can produce them. There's not the conditions in my community to make that happen. How can that be my responsibility? It's hard enough to balance my books with the way I've been funded. So it really involves a whole new way of thinking about risk and trust. And I'm going through quickly, but we'll make these available if you guys find them useful. It's also really different for government. Government right now is really focused on effectively make sure the money flows and doesn't get stolen. If the money gets stolen, it shows up in the newspapers. If it shows up in the newspapers, we don't get real money. Like that's kind of the mentality. In an outcomes-based world, it's not about saying the money doesn't get stolen. It's saying, is the money getting used to actually produce the outcomes that matter? And we're doing some very interesting work in our organization in Los Angeles right now, where taxpayers have approved a bond issuance of $1.5 billion to address homelessness. And so suddenly the outcome of reduced homelessness is on the minds of the politicians. And it's not good enough for them anymore to say, well, we're just going to make sure we fund those homeless shelters because that'll keep people happy. If that work is not actually reducing homelessness, then those politicians are going to be accountable to the taxpayers who said, hey, we gave you this money, why didn't we get the results? So we're seeing what happens when you have a visible outcome, as opposed to just focusing on paying for that activity. It's stressful for government. It's about loosening control and saying, we're not going to tell you what to do, but we're going to work with you together to try to achieve an outcome. And we've seen already, it changes the way that the nonprofit leaders and the government work together. For private donors, anyone here from a foundation or makes donations yourselves? Again, right now, most of us who make donations, we pay and we say, hey, there's a great center downtown, we like that center, let's give you money to expand your program, have more kids come through. In an outcomes-based world, you've actually got a different role. Your job is to help that organization be able to build the capacity to deliver on those outcomes, because that's what's going to unlock the government money. And it's a different role for private donors. And it involves a lot of flexibility. You're not telling you what to do. You're saying, I trust you to get it done, and I'm going to give you the resources to do it. So it's a whole issue of how we can work together in mutual trust. We as an organization, Nonprofit Finance Fund, we do three things. We provide support to nonprofit organizations to help you build your capacity to do this kind of work and other work as well. We do knowledge campaigns like this one we're doing. The third thing we do, we're investors. We provide loans to nonprofits. So we are on this page. Anyone here from between Dallas and Fort Worth, you might know about the North Texas Health Clinic. Very proud that we were able to provide them with a loan, and with that loan, they're going to be able to expand their services. In an outputs-based world which we live in,